What's up, guys? If you don't know me, my name is Brittany. I'm a special effects makeup artist in Los Angeles, California. And today is very exciting because this video is sponsored by Camera Ready Cosmetics. Camera Ready Cosmetics is a makeup, hair, beauty, special effects, everything in between supply store. And today they've asked me to go over the basics of prosthetics. We're gonna go over how to apply them, the different kinds of prosthetics, how to paint them, and how to make them look realistic. Prosthetics are essentially a three-dimensional appliance made of either foam latex, slip latex, gelatin, silicone, or transfers. And we apply them to the skin to create monsters, injuries, old age, pretty much everything that you see in the movies. That's what we're doing. Now, although there are 5 different kinds of prosthetics, we're only gonna go over 2 today. First one being foam latex, and then the second one is going to be a transfer. Now, for educational purposes, this is not gonna be a totally cohesive look. These pieces are very different from each other, and they don't necessarily go with each other. But like I said, we're just teaching today, we're learning, so that's a-okay. So we're gonna start off with the foam latex first. Before you get glue happy and start applying it right away, you need to make sure that you have clean and dry skin. So we're just gonna take a little bit of witch hazel on a cotton ball and wipe away any excess oils, makeups, dirt, anything that could be sitting on the surface of our skin. It's important that you do not use a makeup remover for this step, especially if it's an oil-based one. What can happen is the actual remover can stay and leave kind of like a film on top of your skin, and that could adversely affect the glue that we're gonna be using. So it's much safer to go with witch hazel, or just go and wash your face and dry it down really good. Now that our skin is nice and clean, we can start prepping for application. For today's application, we're going to be using Prosthetics as our adhesive. This is a water-based medical grade adhesive, so it's very, very strong and perfect for applying and blending out our edges of this prosthetic. However, because it is water-based, it is good to note that if you're going to be out in the sun or running around, things that are going to make you sweat, it will cause this glue to break down a bit with the perspiration. But because we're just sitting here in my makeup room, I think we'll be okay. Before applying any glue, it's a good idea to put the prosthetic up onto your face and see exactly where all the edges are going to sit. Honestly, this piece fits me pretty perfectly. So it's looking like we're gonna be able to just jump right on into it. And for reference, this is the Rubberwear Large Aquiline Nose. So you can see it's got like a nice bump on the bridge right there. It juts out. Aquiline means like a bird's beak or like an eagle's beak. So let me give you a little side profile view. That's feeling pretty eagle-like. Now I've just poured a little bit of Prosthetics into a disposable cup off to the side right here, and I'm gonna take a Q-tip and start applying the glue in a small amount, starting in the center of the inside of the prosthetic. We want to avoid the edges for the time being because we're going to save those for last. So I've just applied the adhesive right on the center portion of the nose, pretty much like right about where the tip of my nose is going to sit inside of there. And we're going to set that off to the side to let it dry down. Let me be a bit more clear about that. It's not going to completely dry down, but it's gonna become translucent and very, very tacky, which is ideal for when we stick it to our nose. In the meantime, I'm gonna take a little bit of Prosthetics on a Q-tip again and apply that in the same exact spot on my actual nose. Having it on the inside of the prosthetic and on the tip of my nose is going to create the best adherence possible, which is exactly what we want. And as you can see, it's very milky white sitting on my nose right now. We want to let that dry down. You can use a hair dryer or even like fan your face a little bit to make the process go a little faster. But we want to wait until it's completely translucent before we stick the two together. In the meantime, let's talk a little bit more in detail about exactly what foam latex prosthetics are. So foam latex is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It is a foam latex. And what that means is that it's going to be very soft and squishy. You can see in this video right now as I squish it down, it acts exactly as like a foam mattress would or any other piece of foam would, where it springs right back to its natural shape right after I release. These prosthetics are best used for large like monster applications where you're gonna need very big pieces, but nothing that's gonna weigh down your actor or model too much. Foam latex is also very flexible, so it's a fairly comfortable wear. All right, so it is looking like my nose is pretty dang clear. You can see that milky white color is completely gone. Same with the inside of my prosthetic. So now it's time that we put the two together. So I'm very carefully going to place this right on my nose. Make sure it's lined up properly, because you do have a little bit of time to work with it, but not too terribly much, and you need to be very careful because foam latex is very delicate. So if you just try to rip it off to replace it, it's likely that you're gonna rip it in half. That placement is looking pretty dang good though. So now that I've got it there, I'm gonna press down firmly to make sure that the glue attaches to itself really, really nicely. And just like that, we have started to apply this prosthetic. Now that we've gotten the center part glued down, we're gonna start working our way outwards like this. So I'm gonna lift up the side piece and do the same exact process, applying glue onto my skin and then also onto the prosthetic in the same area, letting those dry down to become translucent and then pressing them together. Again, we're gonna leave the very edge pieces for last, so don't do those just yet. Now that we've got the base of that prosthetic laid down, we still have all these edges sticking up. We gotta get those laid down now. And the reason that we save them for last is because they're so thin and so delicate, which is perfect for blending, but you need to make sure you've got the majority of the prosthetic exactly where you want it before you work on the edges, because if you need to move anything, those edges are the last thing you want glued to your face. So let's do the same exact process, but now working on these little teeny tiny edges. All right, now we can move on to blending. What I like to do is I like to take a disposable sponge and I actually cut it up into an appropriate size for the appliance that I'm putting on. And then I take some tweezers and just kind of pinch it in. These tweezers, when I close them, they actually hold onto the sponge for me, which is really nice and really convenient. But you can use, you can even use a Q-tip for this process, just whatever you have on hand. And I'm gonna dip back in my Prosade, and we're actually gonna use this to blend out our edges as well. Take your sponge and go about half on the prosthetic and half onto your skin to create that transition. We're gonna do this around all of the edges, and as they dry, we're gonna go probably, I would say, at least 3 layers. It depends on how rough your edges may be. All prosthetics are different. Some have really beautiful thin edges, and some can be a little bit on the rougher side. So whatever works best for the appliance you're working with, do it. All right, so the edges are looking really beautiful and blended, and now we can start kind of getting into the painting portion. Before we can even think about putting paint down though, we need to make sure that we seal our foam latex first. Now, just like a kitchen sponge, if you were to pour liquid on it, it pretty much immediately soaks that liquid right up, and this is gonna do the exact same thing. So if I were to put some cream paints or some alcohol paints or some water-based paints onto this, it's going to soak up the color, and the color will still be there, but it's going to kind of change the tone of it a little bit, and so it's not gonna be super accurate. Now, there are paints on the market that you can buy that do kind of a 2-in-1 of sealing off your prosthetic while also laying down paint, but we're not gonna use that today. We are going to do the Prosade method of sealing this off. I know, we're back to the Prosade. It's a great product, what can I say? So basically, I'm taking a new piece of sponge, and I'm just gonna dip it in my Prosade, and we're gonna work with a thin layer again. We don't wanna do a lot and make it all gloopy and take forever to dry. And we're going to put a layer of Prosade over the entire surface of this prosthetic. You want to make sure you get into all the little nooks and crannies. This is basically going to create a barrier between our paint and the foam, which is going to give us a way more consistent base to paint on. Once you've given that enough time to set and it's now transparent, we can move on to powdering. For powder, I'm using the Ben 9 Neutral Set Colorless Powder. We want to do translucent because we don't want to actually put any color down, but what we do want to do is take away the tackiness from this Prosade. I'm just taking a fluffy brush and just gonna go ham. Just get that powder all over. You want to get rid of all that tackiness. And then I like to feel around to make sure I didn't miss any spots. All right, this is feeling pretty dang good. Edges feel nice. There's no more tackiness left on the prosthetic, and we're ready to start painting. Once the prosthetic is totally sealed up, you can paint it with just about whatever you would like. Today I'm going to be using the Graftobian Derma Wheel and the EBA Undead Alcohol Activated Palette. Using the Derma Wheel, I'm going to take a shade that's pretty close to my skin tone, and I just kind of want to put a base over this prosthetic just to get it kind of in the same ballpark as my skin tone before we go in with the details. So as you can see, just starting off with that base definitely took it up a notch, and it's already looking much closer to my skin tone, but it's still not quite there. The undertones are a bit off. I'm just taking a little bit more of that Ben 9 powder just to really set this cream color down. I don't want it moving around when we move on to the next step. Right now, this nose is definitely a bit too yellow for my face, so we need to kind of warm it up a little bit. I'm gonna start by taking some red on a very coarse bristled brush. If you don't have one of these, you can totally use like a toothbrush or any other kind of coarse brush that you can flick. And I'm really thinning out the color with the activator because I want this to be kind of translucent on the skin. So now make sure you close your eyes. You don't want to get this in your eyes. It's not gonna feel good. So I like to just close my eyes and do a few flicks. Wait a second, open, and then pat out any spots that it might be a little too harsh. So this technique is called spattering. And the reason why it's so useful and important is because actually spattering the color in little dots on your face breaks up the skin texture and mimics our actual natural skin texture so much better than if you were to just slab on one solid color. I'm even gonna go back in with the Derma Wheel from Graftobian and just take a tiny, tiny little bit of product on my brush and just kind of pat that over top of that spattering that I just did. And then finally, I'm just gonna take a tiny bit of blue from this alcohol palette just to cool it down and scotch, just a little bit. All right, and just like that, we have a big, beautiful schnoz. Give you a little profile. I like it. And the really great thing about foam latex, like I was saying earlier, is this is so lightweight and comfortable. I can hardly tell it's on my face. I can see it. I can definitely see it, but as far as feeling it, very minimal. Now that we've gone over foam latex and how to apply and paint them, let's move on to transfers. Now transfers, like foam latex, are still a very comfortable wear, but the main difference is the larger the transfer gets, the heavier it is because it is made of a much denser material. The transparency gives that really natural skin-like appearance, and it's also the flexibility it's similar to foam latex, but it's also very different. This behaves much more like actual skin. It doesn't spring back into place, but it's kind of like squishy and fleshy like our skin is. Just like we did before, we need to make sure that our skin is clean of any oils and makeup and dirt. So we're gonna do the same thing that we did earlier and clean off the area that we're going to be applying the prosthetic. Now the really cool thing about transfers is that the glue is already built into this. We don't even have to worry about it. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna figure out exactly where you want it placed. I wanna do it on the side of my face right here. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And if you can see, there's different layers of this transfer paper right here. We're essentially going to kind of peel that off while pressing the prosthetic onto our skin, if that makes sense. I'll walk you through it. So if I want this to go on my face right there, we've got 3 different sections of this transfer paper right here. I'm gonna start with removing the middle section. So I'm gonna kind of fold it and pull it back ever so slightly, just enough. Place it exactly where I want it on my skin. And using this hand, I'm going to push down on the prosthetic into my skin as I'm slowly peeling the backing away. So you can see I've already got a little section of it onto my skin. We're gonna just keep going, keep pushing down as we're pulling away. All right, and just like that, we have our first section removed. So now we're gonna do the same thing with these other 2 sections. I'm gonna do this back one first, just because it's a little more awkward for me. Just like that. All right, and then the last one. All right, and then that is already laid down and glued to my skin, just like that. So this outer portion that's very sheer and isn't textured like the inside part of our wound, this is a burn injury, by the way, I don't know if I said that earlier, but the outer portion that isn't textured like our burn injury is actually made of what's called cap plastic. This cap plastic is acetone soluble, so that means if I take some acetone and I start wiping away at it, it's actually gonna melt into my skin. So just taking a little bit of acetone on a Q-tip, I'm just very lightly going over the edges to really blend it into my skin, and that's what's going to get us that seamless transition. This is also the time to fix any areas that might have like wrinkled a little bit during application. Like right up here, I have a good wrinkle. So I'm just going to carefully blend that out so you won't even be able to see it. When you're doing special effects makeup, you find yourself pretty often using some moderately harsh chemicals like 99% isopropyl alcohol, acetone, various kinds of solvents, and these can be very dangerous if you do not use them properly. So when you are using chemicals like these to blend away edges that's kind of close to your eyes and mouth, be very aware of how your body's feeling. If your eyes are starting to sting from the fumes, take a break, step away for a moment. It shouldn't hurt to put this makeup on or take it off. So be very careful. Stay in tune with how your body's feeling, and don't be afraid to step away and take a break. All right, that is a beautifully blended piece. Now we're just gonna take some Prosade on a sponge again and do a layer over this. This is going to add some extra adherence, but also it's going to seal our prosthetic up and prep it for paint. Just like we did before, we're gonna powder this one as well, get rid of that tackiness. And as you can see, it mimics my skin so beautifully, and it already kind of matches my skin tone all on its own. It's just a fantastic product to work with. Now, when you're painting an injury, it's a little bit different than painting a skin tone. We want to make sure that we understand how the injury got there, what kind of injury it is, how much it's healed, all the details. It's one thing to just throw blood on something and call it a day, but we want this to be like medically accurate. Now, with healed burns, the skin tissue has actually been damaged. So the actual color of the skin is going to be a little bit off from our natural skin tone. It's going to be a little bit lighter, and there's going to be bits of red from the scarring. So I'm starting off with a very thinned out red shade from this alcohol palette, and I'm gonna start going in on the deep points and bringing some redness into them. And as I'm doing that, I'm kind of patting it out with my finger, which is gonna help with the translucency of the color and also kind of bleeding it out to some areas around it, which is gonna give a more natural finish. So you can see that I'm adding depth to the lowest points and then kind of blurring that out into the surrounding areas. And I'm also adding some redness around the injury as a whole, because it's likely if I got burned right there, the tissue around is gonna have some mild scarring as well. So we're just gonna kind of drag it out, just like that. And we want the surrounding skin to be a little splotchy. Now I'm just gonna take a little bit of a pale yellow and run that over the highest points just to highlight them a little bit. All right. Pretty good little burn scar. And lastly, to finish off this healed burn, when flesh is burned and it's healing, it's very shiny because it's, like I said earlier, it's a damaged tissue. So we're gonna take a little bit of bentonized glycerin and lightly brush it over the top. And I'm gonna pat it out just a little bit because I don't want it to be too shiny, but I do want it to look like fresh skin. As far as removal goes, I know that it's very tempting for a lot of people to just rip these off their faces. Please do not do that. That's very damaging to your skin. It can hurt really, really bad, and there's a much easier way to do it. I highly recommend using Talisa's Super Solve. I like to use the sensitive skin formula, but there are various other kinds as well. It's gonna make it so much easier and completely painless to get these off of your skin. All right, and that wraps up our video on foam latex and transfer prosthetics, how to use them, how to apply them, how to paint them, and everything in between. Halloween and all the costume contests that come with it is right around the corner, so I hope you learned something from this video and you're able to take your Halloween costume up a notch this year. Huge thank you to Camera Ready Cosmetics for sponsoring this video. I'm so stoked to get to work with them this Halloween season. If you want to buy any of the products, literally any of the products that I use today, you can find them on camerareadycosmetics.com. I will have all the products linked in the description so you can find them really easy. Please make sure, if you're not already, to subscribe, like, and comment this video, and maybe even turn notification bells on. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.